You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Coming up on the Brew session, Extraction Specialist is the Renegade Rallier she told you not to worry about. We've got 5 new deck lists in Modern and Pioneer. Then on the Flashback, testing results from Riveteers week. Which deck got the Jund 5-0? That's all coming up on Faithless Brewing. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. I am David Robertson, and I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend. He is the CEO of the Faithless Brewing Podcast, and he's here to talk to us. His name is Caved In Online. It's Dan Schreier in real life. Dan, what's going on?
Doing well, David. Excited to talk to you and whoever out there might be listening.
Is that like a reference to aliens or...
I mean, do podcasts like get broadcast out into space? I guess they're not like traditional TV and radio waves, right? Like Faithless Brewing will not reach Alpha Centauri at some point.
Right. So like when the sequel to Contact gets made, they won't like recreate an image of a deck list based on.
Yeah, exactly.
Jodie Foster will have to explain like, all right, they were trying to lower the mana curve.
I feel like the aliens would understand. They would like, brewing has got to be the universal language in some way.
They'd be like, until Looter Scooter is unbanned, we will raise the temperature of your planet 100 degrees a day, every day.
Finally, someone who understands us.
Yeah.
So, today is our brew session, which means we've got a new card we're going to work on. We are also going to have our flashback segment where we tested some Jund, or Riveteers if you prefer, lists last week. So we'll tell you about how all that went. Before we begin, let's just give a quick shout out to our Patreon. Reminder that if you enjoy the show and would like to support what we do, the best way to do so is by joining our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. Make a pledge at any tier you're comfortable with. That'll get you access to our Discord channel. We got just an awesome community of crazy brewers ready to chop it up with you, workshop ideas, dissect the latest tech. It's a great place to come hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we're in the voting process for our new card to brew around, this is the time to make your voice heard. And if you are interested in additional media, maybe you're not a big podcast listener, even though you're listening to this podcast, we are branching out into other forms of social media. Dan has been recording some of his leagues and providing some little play-by-play action, his thought process, observations on cards as the league unfolds. And so we've gotten a lot of good feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a Jund list that I played today, and I believe the league will already be up on YouTube by the time this episode is out. So if you want to just follow along, you can find us on our YouTube channel there and see the gameplay with your own 2 eyes. All right, enough of that. Shall we dive into our card for the week?
Yes, let's do it.
Rescue Expert, as we thought the card was called. It's actually called Extraction Specialist. 2 and a white, human rogue for a 3/2 lifelink. When Extraction Specialist enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature can't attack or block for as long as you control Extraction Specialist. And if that clause sounds weird, the artwork explains it all. You have the heroic rescuer here, and he's gone in and grabbed someone. He's clutching you safe, right? You don't have to do any fighting for as long as you're in the safe hands of the Extraction Specialist. Once he's dead, though, you're back in the fray. Good luck to you.
Right, exactly. Then that's kind of a funny thought. Like you shoot the person carrying someone out, and then they're like, "All right, now it's time to scrap."
Yeah. So it's a pretty straightforward card in terms of like rules go. The only thing that might be ambiguous is this clause, as long as you control extraction specialist. That refers only to this particular copy of the extraction specialist. So if you control multiple copies, they don't all imprison the same card. Similarly, if you blink your extraction specialist, which is something you might want to do to get more value, that breaks the association between the rescuer and the card that was rescued. And that also applies to doing anything like blinking the 2-drop that you brought back. If you blink that, it's now freed from its relationship to the extraction specialist, and it can attack and block freely. You are free to use other abilities, whether those are activated abilities, static effects, whatever. Attacking and blocking is not for everyone, so if you just want that, there's almost no drawback on the extraction specialist. And finally, we'll note the creature types: human, an excellent tribe, and rogue, a not so excellent tribe. Rogues, they have some tribal cards, but not in white, right? Rogues is like a demure tribe. The only irrelevant thing about a white rogue is that, the party mechanic, which we'll talk about a little later on, does tend to be concentrated in white, and, there were not that many rogues available previously. So this is an upgrade in that one specific respect.
Yeah, and, like you said, we'll get to it later, but I don't know that the rogue is going to matter, but if it's going to matter, the list you're proposing is the one that will tell the tale.
All right, so on to some high-level key questions as we're thinking about extraction specialist and what we can do with it, what we want to do with it. I'll just rattle off these questions, and David, you can help me sort out these thoughts. In terms of power level, like, how strong is the extraction specialist? How good is this effect?
Okay, so in Modern, the effect is weaker, but the type of 2-drops you can get back are better. So, I think it's like a B effect if you're getting everything, right? If you get to cast this on curve on turn 3, you get to get back a 1 or 2 drop that is essential to whatever your deck's plan is. Is it Thalia? Hopefully it's Thalia. I think Thalia is awesome.
Flowchart. Is it Thalia? I hope so.
If yes, high five. In Pioneer, the 3/2 body is a lot better. 3/2 lifelink is actually really good. There's a lot of aggro in the format. There's a lot of creature decks. You're going to force them to spend a removal spell on this, which means the creature you get back is basically just free, right? They're going to have to kill this. But the 2-drops you get back are much worse. So I think maybe in a fully kicked version of this, if you let me use the word kicked loosely here, in Pioneer is like a B+, and in Modern is a B. It's closer than you think because the different aspects of the card are a little better.
Yeah, for a 3/2 lifelink, how much would I expect to pay for that? I think 2 mana for a 3/2 lifelink is hard to find. So it's almost worth like a little more than 2 mana just for that body. And then you also get not just another set of stats, but an actual separate card. Obviously, splitting your stats among 2 cards is preferable in every case. So I feel like, it's almost like a mini collected company. It's like an above average company hit would be Extraction Specialist returning a powerful 2-drop, and you get to do it for just 3 mana.
Yeah, and you don't, and you have control, right? So you get to know, you get to sometimes just attack a 2-drop into, it seems like a bad trade or whatever, but you're getting it back, right, if they kill it. Obviously I have my problems with Collected Company, we've talked about it. It also allows you to avoid playing green.
Yeah, Collected Company has so many deck building considerations. The colors, and then you have to do the math, like how many hits do I have, or are they at the right spots on the curve, etc. Extraction Specialist, much more forgiving, right? You can play as many copies as you want. It can be 1, can be 4, and you can pick your spots much more easily.
Also, I think Company really privileges like an insane number of 3-drops, which means your deck is super overloaded at 3, which means you probably have to play a bunch of 1-mana accelerants, and then like a lot of your decisions kind of cascade from there. This really prompts you out to play a natural curve. Like you just play 1-drop, 2-drop, this on 3 is fine. Because if you're playing powerful 1 and 2-drops that they have to kill, you don't have to do extra work necessarily to put something in the graveyard. You can just say like, look, if Thalia or whatever stays in play, Aspirant, whatever your 2-drop is, Meddling Mage, I'm probably in great shape. So if you don't kill this, that's fine. I'm just going to beat you down with it or whatever. And if you do, then this is, like you said, like a 3-mana superior collected company. Because I get a 3/2 lifelink no matter what, which is highly preferable in certain matchups. And then I'm getting back a 2/2 that you thought was good enough to have to kill.
So it sounds like we're pretty happy with the theoretical ceiling of the card. In the best case scenarios, it's doing something quite nice, possibly best in class among 3-drops. With an asterisk, because I got to ask you this next question. What about Renegade Rallier? Extremely similar effect, right? Renegade Rallier and Extraction Specialist. And Rallier, in my opinion, is a card that has been a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, Rallier, obviously very different card in Modern because it's very easy to trigger, as we've learned from Fatal Push, the claws. So Renegade Rallier in a pinch can always just get back a land. It can be a ramp spell. It can get back Ether Vial. It can get back Pyre. I don't know, I'm spacing on other cards we might want. So I think Renegade Rallier is better in decks that have fetch lands, which is a lot of them, but in Modern. In Pioneer, though, it's very hard to trigger Renegade Rallier. So, and the second color is not trivial to add. So if you just want to play white or you don't want to play green, then this is way, way better in Pioneer. And then the lifelink is actually much more relevant again in Pioneer because it is such an aggressive format.
Yeah, I mean, lifelink is huge. One of the reasons Renegade Rallier disappoints me is that oftentimes you made all these concessions and you had a certain play pattern to make sure you got your revolt trigger, and then what do you have to show for it? You have a 3/2 body, and you have to, like, again, try to work to make that relevant to the game. Tack lifelink on, and suddenly it's like, okay, this is going to make a difference in the game. Even if it, like, forces them to just cast a removal spell right away, Renegade Rallier can't do that. They can just ignore it. So I find that even though it's much more narrow on what you can return, Extraction Specialist probably is just like a much higher floor. I think it will impact the games much more reliably than Renegade Rallier will, even in Modern. I hate to say it.
Yeah, I think that's true. Lifelink is worth, like, at least a mana, right? It sounds strange to say it, but it just means you can't race. Like, it races a 6-power creature, 3-power lifelink.
Yeah, and just like always working, not having to worry about revolt. A lot of, like, the tricky lines work the same. Like if you were going to Eldritch Evolution or something, then Extraction Specialist and Renegade Rallier do the same thing. If you're going to
Neoform, I believe you mean to say.
Yes,
from exactly. Our first 5-0 list.
Exactly, episode 1, Neoform your Strangeroot Geist. Or not Strangeroot Geist, because that already came back. Neoform your Voice of Resurgence. Get that Renegade Rallier.
Right.
So, we like Extraction Specialist a little better, I think. Now let me ask you about the fiddly bits of Extraction Specialist. First question, what about this pacifism clause, the can't attack or block? Should I be concerned about that? Like, do I care? Do I just want to let the specialist die naturally? Or do I want to, like, go out of my way to make sure that I'm not hamstrung by that clause?
I think you can't do a bunch of extra work to, like, sack your creature or blink it or whatever. I think you want to play cards that you naturally are already getting what you want out of it. So that's cards like Meddling Mage Thalia that have static abilities like you described that are useful or very relevant or maybe even game winning. A card like Aspirant, right, that's adding a ton of power to the board, especially Aspirant with a lifelinker in play, right? So they're really forced to deal with the 4/3 you just created with your getting back Aspirant. I don't think you ever want to get back something that just like a Tarmogoyf and like, oh, when you eventually kill my 3/2, I get my Tarmogoyf. I don't think that is good enough. But I think getting back something that at least does something when it comes into play, Thalia's Lieutenant as an example. Okay, it makes us a 4/3. They have to answer the 4/3 lifelink. They really do. Like that races 6 power effortlessly. It's just crazy to think about, but it does. So you know that's you at least need a Thalia's Lieutenant like effect. If you want to play Charming Prince to like go all in, like and get all kinds of value, I think that's reasonable. But I guess my example of like a Tarmogoyf like creature that's just a big body like sitting there waiting patiently, I don't think that's worth it. I think you need to be doing something else. In that case, I think Renegade Rallier is the better card.
Okay, now same question, but what about filling up the graveyard to ensure that I have a target? All right, we described a lot of great scenarios where you play your extraction specialist, get back the perfect card, and your opponent is just so devastated that they concede in despair. But what's also going to happen is you're going to have this in your opening hand. You're going to play a 1-drop, play a 2-drop, and on turn 3, you will have the option to play this with nothing in the graveyard. Are we concerned about that? Like, do we need to have a certain amount of self-mill or looting or just dedicated ways to put things into the graveyard?
Yeah, so that's a little more subjective. For me, I was finding that, like, you know, when we were playing those lists with Jace, I actually hated that Graveyard Hate was kind of okay against us because we had like multiple cards that wanted to use the graveyard. I've really liked it as like exactly the way you sort of were describing the previous things. If we're playing on curve and you don't disrupt me, I want my curve to be such that you can't beat it. If you do disrupt my curve, now this card becomes good. If you bring in Graveyard Hate against me, then like whatever, you play Hearse and I play this, I just win that exchange by a lot because, like you say, a 3-2 lifelink just affects the board so much more than a 3-2 non-lifelink. So I don't like going all in on any graveyard stuff. I like this as just part of like a smooth curve. Maybe we have some natural sacrifice for value type of stuff, but I don't want to play anything like Citrus Supplier. I am never going to play it again, for instance, with Jace Vryn's Prodigy. I did not like that interaction. Even though in theory, Jace is a fine target for it because Jace is a card that doesn't need to attack. It gets to loot again by tapping. I did not like that Graveyard Hate, which is bountiful, is actually now good against, like, it's a reasonable thing to bring in. If this is the only card that actually mentions Graveyard in your whole list, they're actually incentivized to not bring any Graveyard Hate. It just doesn't do enough against 4 cards.
So no to Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and Citrus Supplier, you said maybe or no?
No, I don't. I'm just not a believer in Citrus Supplier. I don't like milling compared to looting. I just don't like these random effects where it's just like, oh, I just didn't mill the right 3 cards. Like, I just can't win. That just drives me insane.
Yeah, I mean, the mechanics that are really good at putting stuff in the graveyard in large quantities, decks like that don't tend to want 3-2 lifelink for 3, and they don't tend to have a lot of like 2-drops to get back or 1-drops to get back. So it's actually a fairly specific space. Like, I'm going to call it aggro looting. You know, weirdly, the 2-1 with the connives, whatchamacallit, Raffine's Informant, right? That's like somehow the perfect 2-drop. I think Ledger Shredder is also in this space, right? These are cards that, you know, they do something. They're creatures. You can imagine curving that into a 3-drop and plausibly pressuring the opponent. And then you did loot at some point. You drew a card, discarded a card. Maybe you, by virtue of pressuring the opponent, encourage them to kill your 2-drop, and now your specialist is ready to go.
Yeah, and you just think, like, the cards you mentioned, no one thinks, like, oh, man, they're playing Raffine's Informant, I need to bring in Rest in Peace, or Ledger Shredder, I need to bring in Hearse, right? Like, specifically, you're bringing in Hearse if they're playing Treasure Cruise, or Arclight Phoenix, or whatever. So I like the idea of, like, putting people in that bind, like, oh, how much are they going to use their graveyard? I don't know. I guess I turn off their Extraction Specialist. Again, like we said, turning it off is not very good, because just a 3-2 for 3, if they're spending a whole card exiling our graveyard, we're up a card there again. We didn't have to get a card back. They had to tap 2 mana and cast Rest in Peace.
All right, last question. Are there any particular cards, 1-mana creatures, 2-mana creatures, that you think work especially well with Extraction Specialists? We mentioned Raffine's Informant, Ledger Shredder as possibilities.
Yeah, you and I have played with Archfiend's Vessel. When you get to do that on curve, so you spend 3 mana and you get 8 power, 3 of it lifelink, 5 of it flying. That is not that far away, honestly, from the like Parhelion nut draws. And it requires like way less setup, right? Like, you don't do it as often, but your deck isn't all in. Like, again, are they going to bring in Graveyard Hate? Because I can just play Archfiend's Vessel on 1, like Thalia on 2, and it's like, all right, Rest in Peace, I spend 3 mana on it. Like, okay, I'm hitting you every turn. So yeah, I do love Vessel, and I think the Charming Prince is also very interesting as like a 1 of or 2 of in some of these lists. Again, you have to be less interested in tempo, and I think you need a lot more come into play effects. We haven't named a lot of cards that come into play effects, and 2 mana come into play effects are not that good. There's the like 1 and a white 1/1 enchantment that draws a card when it comes into play, for instance. I just think like playing in that kind of medium range, it's just really hard to compete with how fast and efficient Pioneer is, and the value chains in Modern are like through the roof. So it's, you know, a 2-mana 1/1 that draws a card that you're getting back for 3 mana is, you know, it's not all that.
I did notice one brave Modern player had Spirited Companion. That's the 1 and a white draw card. They had that in their Taxes deck with Extraction Specialist, and they did 5-0. So people are thinking along these lines, but I'm not sold that it's like, certainly for Pioneer, I'm not sold on that.
I'm not either.
I think, yeah, creatures that are so dangerous that they just like compel the opponent to do something to them. You mentioned Melee Mage Thalia already. What was it last week? Emmy told us about like his Modern Taxes build. He played Tidehollow Sculler, and that also works really well, right? It's like, okay, you can ignore the Tidehollow Sculler if you want to, but you're just down your best card. You're really incentivized to kill the Tidehollow Sculler, and then the Extraction Specialist will get it back. And he was doing that even off Ether Vial, so he could do it on their draw phase.
Yeah, exactly. So you want a 2-drop aspirant, something like that, where it's like they have to interact with it, or they're probably going to lose. Like you want your plan A without it to be good enough to force them to respond. Because like we'll get into it when we get into the deck list, but you know, every deck is just trying to do its best curve, right? Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. If you make them play off curve to interact, and then you get a 2-for-1 with your 3-drop, which now becomes like that B plus A- type of stuff, that just puts you in great shape. So yeah, is it Thalia that's making them play off curve? Is it Meddling Mage? Are you taking the best card out of their hand, right, with your 2-mana 2/2 Thoughtseize? They can't just play their normal game, right? You're stopping them from doing that. And as soon as they interact, now you just have a built-in 2-for-1 that's like a 3/2 getting back a 2/2 that takes their best card is a 3-for-1, right? Like that's an insane play.
Yeah, that's nuts. All right, shall we get into some lists?
Let's do it.
I think Pioneer is where we should start. Looks like we have 3 or 4 different Pioneer concepts, and one of them is actually a follow-up to the Raffine list that we talked about last week. So maybe should we just start with that? Because I know you got a little more data on an updated build.
Yeah, so I played a bad version of the list. I made some recommendations. You updated it and talked about Esper week. Still, you know, keeping some Jaces, etc. And I think you went 3/2. I went all the way. So I was like, why don't I just go all the way into creature? So I played a deck that was 4 Fatal Push, 4 Archfiend's Vessel, 4 Bloodsoaked Champion, 4 Raffine's Informant, 4 Aspirant, 4 Thalia, 1 Acquisitions Expert, 4 Extraction Specialist, 4 Raffine, 2 Skywood Clave Apparition, 2 Graveyard Trespasser, 23 lands. I went 3/2, but the list actually felt great. I crushed 2 different builds of Spirits, and I beat Blue-Red Phoenix, you know, very, very easily, and lost to, you know, some non-functional mana against Niv Mizzet, and lost to Winota, you know, just drawing the nuts. And I don't think I had a great sideboard plan. I have a proposed update here, but the thing that really strikes me about this is how your plan on curve disrupts them, right? Like the best draw for blue-red Xerox is turn 1 Prowess Creature, turn 2 Shredder, like turn 3 Expressive Iteration, play a second spell, right? If we're on the play and we go turn 1 Archfiend's Vessel, turn 2 Aspirants, make our Vessel 2/2 and attack, they can't just play Shredder into that. They actually have to stop playing Shredder. They have to kill Aspirant, or they have to kill the Vessel. And then our Extraction Specialist is awesome. And then, let's say they do that, we can also play Raffine. So Extraction, like, what I realized is Raffine is insane, and Specialist is like a bad Raffine. But you can't play any more than 4 Raffines. So it just gives you another like super powerful 3-drop to do on curve. And your 2-drops are so good they have to interact with them. Aspirant and Thalia are so good in the format right now. They're just highly disruptive. And so it gives you a chance to often get your Specialist to be that 2-for-1 that we're talking about.
Yeah, I also found that Extraction Specialist, Raffine Scheming Seer, and somewhat Archfiend's Vessel, like those were the power cards. The rest was just filler. I like Luminarch Aspirant a fair bit. I was playing Jace, that wasn't so impressive, but it was like okay. It did push me more into like the mid-range space where I was often trying to control the board, kill the opponent's threats. You've gone into an aggro direction where I mean, you still have the ability to kill creatures, but you're much more likely to just curve out with attackers every turn.
Yeah, really trimming down on 3-drops. So the only 3-drop that isn't Specialist or Raffine is just the Miser's Apparition. Don't need Trespasser, don't need the body. A bunch more Acquisitions Experts, because we have Vessel is a Cleric, Champion is a Warrior, Informant is a Wizard, Aspirant is a Cleric, Expert is a Rogue, Specialist is a Rogue. So we actually can get all 4. And I was actually finding that in the mid game, I was literally just looting a ton, just trying to like stop New Visit from doing whatever. Because you actually just get to see their hand. You just 2 mana take their hand. And if this card dies, like when it chumps, that's an actual awesome card to get back with Specialist. It differs from like the 1/2 Flying Human because they get the card back. This is just like card advantage. Like you just even play it against Phoenix. They have to attack through it, right? With their prowess creature, you chump block, you get it back with Specialist. You're just up a lot of cards. It's really hard for them to deal with that.
Yeah, I was pleased when I saw that Acquisitions Expert kept increasing in quantity in your list. And maybe that's a perfect segue to our next build. Because I've also been thinking about these creature types. Been wanting to do this party deck for a while now, David, and I think this week is finally the week.
Yeah, this is a list you proposed, I think, right when we kind of were coming up with our first ideas of lists for the whole format. I think you even posted it maybe on the Twitter feed. So why don't you walk us through it?
All right, so I'm in white-black aggro. You're going to hear a lot of similar cards to the Esper Raffine aggro that David was playing, but in order to streamline my mana, I'm not splashing into blue anymore. My 1-drops, Archpriest of Iona, Bloodsoaked Champion, 4 of each. Also playing 1 Usher of the Fallen and 1 Gutter Bones. These are just 2 ones that happen to have the warrior subtype, because what I'm trying to do is get a balanced mix of clerics, rogues, wizards, and warriors to take best advantage of the party mechanic. And I've got 3 different party payoffs in the deck. Actually, 4 different party payoffs in the deck. I think Archpriest of Iona is probably the best one. This is the 1-drop that its power increases relative to how much party you have, and then if you ever get to a full party, you get to get an additional power every combat plus flying.
I think it can target any other creature, which is actually what makes it more relevant for me with Specialist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't tried that yet, but that sounds so sweet. Yeah, I mean, David, you've mentioned there's not that many good 1-drops in Pioneer. This could be the Champion of the Parish style 1-drop that humans currently lacks. That's my hope anyway.
Well, I think you're making the right choices to give it a chance to be that, right? There isn't a Champion of Parish. This is as close as we get, and I think you're bending some of your card choices to maximize that.
Yeah. So I've got 10 1-drops, 12 2-drops, 4 Luminarch Aspirant, 4 Raffine's Informant, 3 Acquisitions Expert. That's the same 2-drops that David was just playing in his deck. I'm also playing 1 copy of Tenacious Underdog. I mean, weirdly enough, Warrior is like the hardest type to be happy with. Like, there's plenty of Warriors, but most of them suck. So beyond the 4 Bloodsoaked Champion, it was a struggle to find Warriors for this deck. So those are my 2 slot. On 3, I have the 4 Extraction Specialist, 3 copies of Mage's Attendant. This is 2 and a white, 3/2 Cat Rogue. Enters the battlefield, you also get a 1/1 blue wizard that can sacrifice itself to like counter a non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1, and you also have to pay 1 to do that. So it's a moderately disruptive thing, but what really intrigued me between Extraction Specialist and Mage's Attendant was that these are 2 different 3-drops that contribute 2 bodies towards my party, potentially 2 bodies of different types. And this is the thing that party has really struggled with, is that however much you can like finesse the numbers to get the right number of each tribe, at a certain point, they all die to the same removal spells. They all die to push, they all die to strangle or lightning bolt or whatever else. Your chances of assembling a full party are very, very slim if you don't have cards that bring 2 bodies at once. And finally, I have cards that can do that. So those are my creatures to start the curve. What are my payoffs? Well, I already mentioned the Archpriest. I already mentioned the Acquisitions Expert that can see a number of cards based on how many creatures are in my party. What if we go even bigger? I want to play Coveted Prize. This is perhaps the biggest payoff. It's 4 and a black sorcery, but it costs 1 less for each member in my party. And then if I have the full party, if I have all 4 types, I cast it for a single black, I tutor for any card, and then I get to free cast any card CMC 4 or less. So I'm incentivized to have some spectacular tutor targets that cost 4 mana that I can just Coveted Prize for 1, go find my, in this case, Squad Commander, cast it for free, and just have a spectacular turn. Squad Commander is also a party payoff. It's 3 and a white, 3/3 core warrior. When it enters the battlefield, create 1/1 core warrior creature tokens for each creature in your party. And then if you have a full party, at the beginning of combat, you also get to give your entire team indestructible and +1/+0. So I'm playing 2 copies of Squad Commander. And then for my remaining slots, 1 Skyclave Apparition, 1 Portable Hole, just to have a little more removal. 24 lands because the curve is somewhat high, but that does let me play 4 Mutavaults, which is the hidden party creature, the best creature for party decks because of Changeling.
Yeah, it's a super interesting deck. So the thing that's interesting about it is you're not playing basically any disruption at all. And one of the things that I was worried about for the format is, have we kind of like solved all the proactive plans and really like the good finishes are just decks that are good at disrupting them? You know, we talked about this last week. There was like a Boros deck that was almost like had some hate bear type creatures. This list is saying like, look, I actually think my plan A might be competitive with your plan A. And, you know, we know that Coveted Prize is kind of the ultimate payoff, right? If you get to play 1 black mana to tutor your deck for a 4-drop or even a 3-drop or whatever, I mean, it's just so good. It just sucks like we can't splash blue or something, right? Like Reflector Mage is a wizard and is a removal spell, you know, instead of having to play like Skyclave Apparition or Portable Hole or something like that. But I don't know that we have enough humans, right? Because like Squad Commander is a core. I don't know what Mage's Attendant is.
Well, here's my question. If I were going to splash a 3rd color, how many Mutavaults can I play? Because I really want to play as many Mutavaults as I possibly can.
Oh, we'll be playing 4 Mutavaults no matter what.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, if they're all humans, then you could splash with 8 of the other lands. Because you're not really casting anything other than creatures. And a lot of your cards are creatures, right? Or humans. Archpriest, Blood Soak Champion, Luminarch Aspirant, Raffine's Informant, Acquisitions Expert, Tenacious Underdog, Extractions Specialist.
Yeah, almost everything is a human. That's another big question mark. Like, why am I not playing human payoffs? Maybe I should just accept that I don't need to get that big of a party and just trim some numbers to get 4 Thalia's Lieutenants in there and like a General Kudrow or something.
Yeah, I think this is probably a better place to start though. Like I don't think anyone's ever tried to push it all the way and see like how reasonable it is. And I think you're right that we finally have the tools that we're getting 2 bodies to our party plus the Mutavault, right? So like
that's the hope.
Yeah.
I expect that when I test this, what I will find is that Archpriest of Iona is very good, Acquisitions Expert is very good, and they're good enough that they actually don't need me. I don't need the top half of the party payoff. I'm guessing that's what's going to happen. Is that Coveted Prize will be sweet, but like a little too clunky, and then I'll maybe find that I'm drawing the Squad Commander too often when I'd rather just have a lower curve. But we'll see. I mean, this is what I'm going to test.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. We'll get one screen. I bet you get one screenshot of Coveted Prize doing the thing.
That is what I want. For the content. Do it for the content.
Do
for
it
that
for
one
the people.
Screenshot, which I can then crow about next week on the podcast.
Yeah, get on YouTube.
Exactly. Just a repeating loop, just like me casting the Coveted Prize one time.
This can be done.
All right. David, staying in Pioneer, where are we going next?
All right, I don't know exactly what the card numbers will be, but the one thing I'm very interested in is using Pyre to sacrifice a 2-drop to get an Extraction Specialist. So this is a list. So our 1-drops are Thraben Inspector, Unlucky Witness. They're humans. Our 2-drops are Charming Prince, Priest of Forgotten Gods, which works very well with Unlucky Witness, Acquisitions Expert, and Thalia just as a tutor target. So the hope is we Pyre our Charming Prince into Extraction Specialist, blink our Extraction Specialist, get back whatever else is in our graveyard, Priest of Forgotten Gods is a powerful card, but like you always say, it dies. That's the kind of 2-drop that we're more interested in if we have Extraction Specialists in our deck. The rest of our like human curve, right? We got Reflector Mage. Xanthid Necromancer is a super cool human to have in a deck with Pyre and Priest because you get sacrifice value. Liliana, another card. You have Winota as like a cool card you can target if you've got a bunch of 2/2s from your Xanthid Necromancer running around. And just like a one-of Cloud Blazer on top. So I'm not exactly sure on all the numbers, but I'm interested in a Pyre deck because now we have an extra 1-drop we don't mind sacrificing, which is Unlucky Witness. And then I like a 2-drop, some number of Charming Prince, Priest of Forgotten Gods, Acquisitions Expert, etc., with some number of Extraction Specialists to get them back. And Priest of Forgotten Gods is a little more attractive than it would normally be because we actually want that mana boost. We want to be able to play Pyre and use it. And so, like, to always have an extra use for that mana is just the clues from Thraben Inspector and the Pyre itself.
Yeah, seeing some of the cards you're thinking about, it looks like you're not concerned about the color requirements in this deck. Like, or maybe this is still a theoretical concept, but...
Well, these are all humans, so we get to play 8, lands at smooth for that. We have some number of black lands because the only colored spell is black. Fatal Push. The sideboard probably would contain some of the black-white instant. I think it's called Dire Tactics or something.
Mm-hmm.
That exiles a creature. But yeah, everything else is like more or less just going to get cast with the human lands or tutored for with the Pyre.
Yeah, I played against just today actually what looked like a 5-color humans deck. They were not playing Pyre of Heroes. They were just playing like Collected Company and Mantis Riders and the like. But the mana looked pretty solid, so maybe you're right. Maybe as long as you're within tribe, this is the time to just go nuts with 4 or 5-color tribal decks.
Yeah, the 5C humans deck that I think Claudio 5-0'd with and has really like encouraged people to play, that actually has some really tight requirements because you're playing the 3/3, it's like green for the 3/3 human werewolf that, if you attack with 6 power, you get to draw. And then you're also playing the Jeskai Mantis Rider. So you really need to like draw all your tribal lands. This deck is mostly Mardu with just a light blue splash. There's not a single green card. And there's like a couple blue cards.
Yeah, that Collected Company deck is maybe saying, I'm just going to pick the most powerful humans. But what you've got here is like the most synergistic humans.
Right.
Which is much sweeter. I want to curve that Unlucky Witness into Priest of Forgotten Gods. That's the good stuff.
Yeah, and so, the numbers and stuff I'm still working on. I think a list like this needs to have the appropriate number of hate bears, right? So we have like a Kambal to tutor for, or we have a Thalia to tutor for. You have to have ways to interact with some of the decks that can go over the top of you. It does suck that the human you'd want to tutor for to stop Winota is a card that stops Pyre from working and Extraction Specialist.
Which card is that?
The 2/2 flash that prevents cards from, or it exiles creatures when they come into play if they weren't cast.
Oh, the Containment Priest.
Containment Priest, yeah.
Yes.
So you can bring it in out of your board and you can tutor for it, but then your Pyre is, kind of a useless lump of rock.
All right, so that's a synergistic Pyre humans deck. You've also got something that's a little more aggressive.
Yeah, so this is similar to the list you proposed, but instead of the party mechanic, it's really all in on the humans aspect. So our 1-drops are Thraben Inspector, Bloodsoaked Champion, 4 push. I think the card's just too good right now. 1 Giant Killer. Then our 3-drops, 3 Thalia, 4 Luminarch Aspirant, 4 Thalia's Lieutenant, 4 Sun Gold Sentinel, 2 Acquisitions Specialist. And then our 3-drops are Extraction Specialist, General Kudro, and Adeline. So we're just trying to play right on curve, 1, 2, 3. Again, we have a bunch of 2-drops that we don't mind getting back. Getting back Thalia's Lieutenant, getting back Luminarch Aspirant, getting back Thalia in certain matchups. Sun Gold Sentinel exiling graveyards means that decks that care about their graveyard have to kill it. We get to get it back with Extraction Specialist, and then we get to go, ham with it again.
Yeah, Sun Gold Sentinel was the card that jumped out right away. I just don't see that card very often. I played it in Standard at the Pro Tour, but it was okay. It was above average. But I wouldn't cut any other 2-drop for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I saw it a lot in the dying days of Luris. I'm trying to think of who it was. Mason, the Twitter streamer, was playing a lot of like black white Luris humans when he would play Pioneer, which wasn't often, and was really high on Sun Gold Sentinel. I like having main deck ways to just exile cards, and again, a 2-mana card that does an effect that I'm interested in that I can always get back is very interesting to me.
Yeah, this list feels like the successor to those Luris human decks, where it's like staying pretty low curve. I feel like your turn 3 plays are all like super high impact. Like there's only 7 3-drops, but they're Extraction Specialist, General Kudro, and Adeline. Those all pack a huge punch. You've left room for 23 lands. I assume you get to play Mutavaults and, possibly other creature lands in that mana base as well.
Yeah, and not going into blue, like, yes, Reflector Mage is a powerful card. It's a cool card. I actually think it's just a little too defensive, especially if you're not doing, like, the Collected Company thing. I think your deck just really wants to be low to the ground. And so, if you buy back Luminarch Aspirant, I mean, that really is the best 2-drop, right? Luminarch Aspirant gets bought back by Extraction Specialist, immediately makes it 4/3. So, I mean, if you're against another aggro deck, they have to kill your 4/3 lifelink. There's nothing to be done about it. And so they're leaving Aspirant in play. It's just a crazy, conundrum to put them in.
All right, so those are some Pioneer concepts. Before we leave the card, I do want to mention that, it has actually seen a little bit of success in formats as far back as Modern, even in Legacy. Damon's not here with us this week, but he's been tearing it up in Legacy. He just made yet another top 8 in Legacy 1K. He's on just an absolute tear. I think he top 8'd like 5 of his last 6 1Ks.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And apparently Death and Taxes in Legacy has just like really embraced Extraction Specialist. I found like 20 different published lists, sometimes playing 2 copies, usually playing 1 copy. The key interaction there in Legacy is that you can tutor for it with Recruiter of the Guard, because it checks toughness. So you just find it when you need it. But it's of the right power level, even in a format like Legacy. What about Modern? Well, Death and Taxes exists there as well. Emmy tested that last week. I found 2 different lists published in the 5.0s that were incorporating some number of Extraction Specialists. One was like a Yorian, kind of a slower blink deck. It had the Spirited Companions that I alluded to earlier. Another one was like more like a Stoneblade variant. And 2 different takes on Humans Tribal in Modern, incorporating the Specialist with Pyre of Heroes. And that kind of surprised me, I'll be honest. I did not think that Pyre of Heroes was the preferred way to build humans in Modern. But the player Shotokan got 6th place in the weekend challenge, playing a Pyre of Heroes humans deck with 2 Extraction Specialists over the weekend.
Yeah, I actually watched them from the other side. I was watching Aspiring Spike stream while I was rebuilding my sink. And he played this person and was just like, oh man, Pyre, that's kind of a cool card. And then like 4 turns later, was like, well, I had 0% chance to win. Just like he had to kill Thalia. He was on like a Phoenix deck. And then they just sacrificed a 2-drop and went and got Extraction Specialist and got back Thalia. Plus they had a lifelink. Like, it's exactly what we're describing. So was he not going to kill the lifelink creature and try to race them with Phoenixes? Was he going to kill Thalia so he could try to bring back Phoenix? Like, and then the entire time there's always a threat of Lieutenant, making the lifelink creature bigger. And then once, Lieutenant's had its use, you can sack Lieutenant, get back Extraction Specialist, get a Lieutenant back, like if you have a wide board, so like Lieutenant like doubles its triggers for everybody. Yeah, just a super cool list. And then tutored for Judith for the last attack to kill him.
Oh well. Yeah, I mean, a somewhat limited toolbox in the main deck, just 1 Judith, 1 Yawgmoth Thran Physician, and the 2 specialists, because your primary plan is so strong. But then in the sideboard, you find all of those juicy one-ofs to tutor up. Dawnbringer Cleric, Lavinia, Traneth Magistrate. There's a Masked Vandal here. Magus of the Moon, Whirler Rogue, Cathar Commando. Yeah, cool builds. I might be a believer now.
Dawnbringer Cleric is a card that is awesome against mono red because they have a bunch of enchantments and blows up Urza's Saga is so cool. So you have Dawnbringer Cleric and Magus of the Moon. Like you just have a bunch of different ways to kill that land. I really like that.
Oh, that's nice.
And Dawnbringer Cleric, again, it kills the first one. They play another one. You sack the cleric. You get back. You get extraction special, so you get it back. Kill it again. You're just on the landy plan.
It's super powerful. Like a human's deck, because of their mana base, just cannot play Renegade Rallier. So there wasn't really an incentive to explore that line before. But it sounds super powerful. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, so this list, the thing that I like about it is, of course, in Modern you get to play Ethervile. And so with Ethervile, you can really like make your Pyre work with only like 2 or 3 lands in play. I think Spike lost both games and his opponent only had 3 or 4 lands. And you can use your Canopy and Silent Clearings, right, to make sure you don't flood. The problem in Pioneer, right, is you have to play some kind of way to get that mana juice, and that's why I was playing the 1 in a black creature that sacrifices creatures to generate mana. Because you do need to like use Pyre every turn, or you're really not getting paid off for putting this card in your deck.
Yeah. All right, so that's Extraction Specialists. As is our custom, we will take a week, test this card, see how it performs, and let you know how it all played out when we come back next time. Speaking of which, it is that time, our flashback segment. We got to tell you a little bit about our testing from Jund Week. We got 3 lists to get through here. David, where should we go first?
Let's start in Modern. This is the first list that any of us played. I know even when we first started talking about the format, Emmy was really excited about Riveteers Ascendancy with the various evoke creatures. We know about the evoke elementals. They're very powerful in general, so it's like a card that makes cards you want to play already even more powerful was of interest. You built a Jund list here, trying to exploit the way that the Ascendancy interacts, and you even have a bunch of other creatures that can sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So I have 4 Grief, 4 Fury, and when I'm doing that, I don't just start from scratch, right? There are a family of decks that start with 4 Grief, 4 Fury, and they usually next go to cards like Seasoned Pyromancer. They always have Ragavan, and they have, some number of like Malakir Rebirth, Undying Evil, and variant cards like that. A little bit of removal, and maybe like Daughty Voidwalkers or something. Well, it occurred to me that between Grief, Fury, and Voidwalker, that's already 12 creatures that have a built-in self-sacrifice. So those cards are all going to trigger the Riveteers Ascendancy. Even just sacrificing a Voidwalker with Ascendancy in play gets me a Ragavan back. Ragavan tends to find its way into the graveyard very easily. So it seemed like it shouldn't be too hard to just, add some green shocklands in, put the Riveteers Ascendancy in. If I draw at the wrong time, no big deal. It pitches to both Grief and Fury, which is like my primary plan anyway. I wanted to juke the numbers a little bit, much like we were saying with Extraction Specialist. Riveteers Ascendancy does really want you to have something in the graveyard, so I succumbed to temptation and put a couple of Citrus Suppliers in the deck just to try to fill up the graveyard a little bit more. I was playing 1 Kroxa, that self-sacrifices itself, 2 Deadly Disputes, 2 Grist the Hunger Tides. These are, again, cards that do something useful for the deck while also having that sacrifice condition that will potentially let me get value off the Ascendancy. And finally, 1 Shriekmaw. Basically, I took every slot that used to be like a Dreadbore or a Terminate and replaced it with Shriekmaw, Grist, because they do the same thing while sacrificing. So the theory seemed to make sense to me on paper. In practice, not so much. Played a league with this, and it was just an absolute disaster. Looking at my results here, 0-2, 0-2, 0-2, 2-1, 0-2 for the clean 1-4 result.
So whoever that is at Murktide player should feel really bad about themselves.
Oh, they do. They lost to what was clearly an anemic deck just limping across the finish line. What happened? Well, for starters, I mentioned I was like working off existing decks, and I heard this voice in the back of my head, Jerry Thompson from Arena Deck List. And I was like, kind of needling me, like, just build your own mana base. Like, I'll be describing something, and he's like, gotta build your own mana base. Don't be lazy. Don't just copy a mana base. So I'm like, all right, fine. I'll like think it through myself and like build my own mana base. And what happens when you do that is sometimes you forget to put Blood Crypts in the deck. I forgot to put my red-black Shockland into my Rakdos deck, and the results were quite tragic. I realized this in game one, and I was like, you know what? I can make it work. I've got, I can just fetch green lands instead, at least get some useful data. The data was, you can't play this without the without the Blood Crypts. Seasoned Pyromancer was like almost impossible to cast in my deck, which was very, very sad. But beyond that, I was just looking to see, like, all right, what are the board states in which I have the opportunity to play Riveteers Ascendancy? How much can it do for me? And what I found was that it was really tough. Like, so many times I had to make a choice. Like, do I pitch the Ascendancy so that I can Grief or Fury right now and maintain board parity? Like, keep the battlefield under control, neutralize the threat, and like stay in the game? Or do I hold the Ascendancy, try to cast it next turn, and then do like a sweet value line like 1 or 2 turns down the road? How much faith do I have in the Ascendancy's ability to like be a catch-up card? And I was just presented with this dilemma over and over again. Most of the time, if I was like being really honest, I just like the correct play was to pitch the Ascendancy, which is not a problem. Like that's one of the lines, was one of the reasons I felt confident putting it in the deck, but it also suggested that there's not going to be that many game states where you can get like a fantastic turn with Riveteers Ascendancy. It's a little too slow.
So yeah, you very rarely got to do the like turn 3 Ascendancy after they'd killed your Ragavan or Voidwalker or whatever, and then like Grief plus get something back.
Yeah, it was extremely rare. The other thing that I discovered, which is obvious, it's right there on the card, but the card comes back tapped from Riveteers Ascendancy. That never occurred to me, and it like blew me out really badly. I was playing against like a Goblins deck, and I just needed to block. I had the Riveteers Ascendancy. I even got back, I cast a Fury, got back a Grief or something, and I was like, okay, this will stabilize me. Except it didn't, because the card came back tapped. So it was just like little things like that I don't know, like, why they added that clause. Like, were they concerned about Riveteers Ascendancy being too good? Or if they just like did it as a safety valve, but it just combines to make it like not quite good enough in Modern. And the last thing that I learned was that even though, I think of this as like a bad graveyard deck, like there are graveyard synergies, but they're not powerful. Just because you're a bad graveyard deck, you're still going to fold graveyard hate. Your opponents are going to bring in all their strong graveyard hate, and you're going to be very, very sad. I had, sequences where I just like played the Ascendancy, sacked my Fury to Deadly Dispute, and I was like going to get back a Fulminator Mage and have a great turn. They flashed an Endurance, took out the Fulminator Mage in response, and then like I was just destroyed. I had just given up my best creature, didn't get to destroy their land. It was just like it was a whole mess.
Well, that's too bad. I know Emmy was really excited about this type of shell, and to find out that it was, so mediocre is disappointing.
I kind of want to try again just because I feel like it can't be that bad. Like, I must have like changed, I just must have tweaked a few too many knobs. Like, Rakdos Grief Fury is a deck that sometimes wins. Like, when I was looking for results, there were plenty of recent results, but when I was just like looking at my opening hands, they felt barely playable. So I wondered if it's like the margin for error is not that large in like attrition decks like this. I struggle with card flow. I kind of really wanted more copies of Seasoned Pyromancer. Like, maybe I need to put Fable the Mirror Breaker back in. Even Dauthi Voidwalker, just having Shadow, so it didn't help me at all on defense, was kind of a problem. I thought maybe I should change that to like a Blood Tithe Harvester, just give that card a chance. See if it can earn a spot. There's things to tweak, maybe play more Grists, but yeah, this build was not it.
Okay, well, We appreciate you collecting the data, even as painful as it may have been.
All right, on to happier news where there's more match wins to be had. Let's jump to Pioneer. You and I were both interested in the card Riveteers Charm. So tell me what you liked about the Charm and what did you end up playing?
Well, I like Charm for many reasons. One, I really like to draw cards, and this is a 3-mana instant in a perfect world, draw 3. But it also does other stuff, right? It's not just a draw spell. It can be a removal spell, and it hits all the cards you really want it to. Most of the time, it's going to hit Winota. And that's the big thing for me. So it's an instant speed way to hit Winota that's cheaper than Winota is. So that's already a fine play. And then in a format where people are playing Ledger Shredder, damage-based removal isn't that great, right? They can play Ledger Shredder on their turn and trigger it, and then your Strangle isn't good anymore, and your various other, shock effects, stomps, etc. This always gets the highest casting cost creature, which becomes relevant against the mono green list as well, which I beat easily because this card just handles their 5-drops with the greatest of ease.
Yeah, it takes out the highest converted mana cost creature or planeswalker.
Yeah, and I found, at least in my league, that I was using it for removal a good chunk of the time, but not always. So the fact that you can, every once in a while, you're like, one of your better removal spells is just like a draw 2.5 cards is like really sweet.
Yeah, so I postulated that you put the Riveteers Charm in your deck because you want the draw 3. How often did you draw 3?
I would say like 30% of the time.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
So if I was ahead, I would always use it as removal because I was putting pressure on them. If I was at parity, it was almost always a draw 3 that would win the game. And if I was behind, it wasn't good enough in any mode. And I lost terribly.
All right, so you're playing all 4 copies of Riveteers Charm. The rest of your deck, I'm just looking at the creatures. I mean, this is like a lowish curve, mid-range good stuff, right? You're playing Bloodtithe Harvester, Graveyard Trespasser, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Bonecrusher Giant, 3 copies of Tenacious Underdog.
Yeah, I wanted something that was low to the ground. It was useful. So like when I beat Mono Green and Niv Mizzet, you just want to put a clock, right? You are the beatdown. They're going to win the late game. And I was fortunate enough to draw, a few underdogs there. At the same time, I had to board it out a lot against basically any deck where I felt like I boarded out against Mono Green, I boarded out against Phoenix, I boarded out against Angels, and I boarded out against Spirits. So I don't know that you need 3. I think you want a couple just as a resource. It is 2 mana. That was the thing that sucks sometimes, is if you like on turn 3 or 4, like on their end of turn, if you charm to draw and you open up 2 3-drops, that just feels really bad. And sometimes I even like had 2 3-drops and a land that came into play tapped. So if I want to get my like 2-for-1, I have to maybe like play off curve. And your deck is already really clunky. Like Fable is a super clunky card, especially on the draw. So yeah, I'd have to rethink my like 2-drop situation. I did love that Bonecrusher Giant could always just 2-mana shock something, including them, just to like put it in layaway and I can get back to it later.
Yeah. It's a kind of low synergy deck, but that's the Jund way, right?
Yes.
I mean, did you feel like in terms of power level that you were like keeping pace, or were you favored in an attrition game, or was it like you didn't have access to the most powerful cards in the format?
No, the deck felt very powerful. The games I lost was when I draw a few too many lands or a few too few lands. So I had to mulligan a ton of 1-land hands. I started almost every game with 6 cards. That's just sort of bad luck. Especially in a deck, I'm only playing 23 lands. Maybe I should play 24, but I'm playing 23 lands plus 2 carry-added. That felt like the right number of mana sources to me. But yeah, maybe I'd add a 24th land and cut to 1 carry-added. Maybe I'd replace Treacherous Underdog with a carry-added and play another land, just because you do have a lot of card flow. The card that felt really clunky to me is Fable. The card reminds me a lot, weird, this is a weird comparison. It reminds me a lot of 4-mana Gideon, where on the play it feels awesome. Like I always want to play it on turn 3 on the play. And on the draw it feels like I cannot win if I play this on turn 3. Like if my turn 3 play on the draw is cast Fable, I don't think I won a single game where I did that. And I don't think I've ever lost to an opponent that's ever done that. It's just so slow. Like you play a 2/2 that isn't a good blocker and probably can't attack. And then like next turn you hope to flip through cards, and it's bad against Spell Pierce. Like it just doesn't do anything. But again, like if I'm on the draw, or excuse me, if I'm on the play, it feels awesome because often I just get to attack into nothing. They're under some pressure, and then the treasure lets me do something else. Which makes me think I'm going to start experimenting with like, I don't think I want to cut from 4 Fables because like I said, it's so great. But I'm going to start cutting down on them on the draw. I actually don't think this card is like very good at all on the draw. But on the play, I think it's maybe your best 3-drop. So
interesting. So I played like a very similar list, and it had somewhat similar cards, right? I was playing 4 Riveteers Charm, 4 Fable, 4 Bloodtithe Harvester. Looks like we both had, you know, a mix of Thought Feast and Fatal Push. I played 2 Strangles, you played 1 Strangle and 1 Blood Chief's Thirst. I was playing Abrupt Decay Dreadbore, where you were playing Bonecrusher Giants. Oh, you also had Dreadbore. Okay, yeah. So a lot of similarities here. The difference was that because it was Riveteers theme week, I wanted to get a couple more Riveteers cards in there.
Yes.
And we had found this interesting Jund list from the 5-0s a few weeks back with Ziatora's Envoy. 1 black, red, green, so that's 4 mana, 5/4 trample, blitz for 5. So you can blitz it by paying 5, get to attack, sacrifice it, end the turn, and draw a card. Why would you do that? Well, it has the ability that when Ziatora's Envoy deals combat damage to the defending player, you get to look at your top card of your deck and potentially cast it for free. If it's a land, you can also play it for free if you have a land drop available. And if you can't do that, you put it in your hand. Whether you can do it or not is determined by, you know, how much damage you dealt to them and whether that's greater than the casting cost. Anyway, that's my top end. Is this card any good? That was my big question. I played a league with this and it was not good. So I think I answered that question for myself pretty quickly. It didn't take many hands of being like, oh God, this card is terrible. I was really missing just like the clean Graveyard Trespassers that you had in your list. So when I played the deck, like, yeah, I got annihilated by 2 tier decks, by Is It Phoenix and Mono Red. Both of these decks just ran circles around me. After that, I was able to like find softer competition, like some kind of suspect creature decks, green white life gain deck, a Vannifar pod deck, and a 5-color Humans Company, where the plan there was pretty clear. Just try to draw as much removal as you can and just like hope you have something left over at the end. So I was like actually satisfied with Fable in those games, but maybe you were not finding matchups like that in your league.
Well, like I lost to Bant Angels. Yeah. Like it felt really bad against Phoenix. And it felt like very mediocre against like Mono Green, for instance. And it feels bad against Spirits. Like it's just so clunky against those decks. And I think I would probably side out a good chunk of time against Winota as well. Like,
yeah, just looking at the matchups, I think I faced more favorable or perhaps easier non-tier decks in my league. Those are the matchups I was able to win at least. So I did salvage the 3-2 out of it, but
so we went 5-5. So it was a classic Jund week after all.
Exactly. Exactly.
I will say, like, Riveteers Charm to me felt really good. I was really excited to cast it. I did not always, you know, like I said, sometimes I just played another 3-drop off of it and a land. That's not the greatest. It makes me wonder if there's like more instant speed stuff you could do with it. Like maybe I should be playing like the full 4 Bonecrusher Giant just to have like other stuff to leave mana up for. Are there other like I don't know, flash threats in those colors where like the 3 mana is not as, I guess then but you have to play all those cards on your turn. But yeah, like one time I played it with 5 mana up and just like flashed it on end of turn and then just shocked with the giant still on their end of turn, like against spirits, and then got to untap, like play the land and a thing. Like it just felt like so much value, but I don't know.
That sounds great. I mean, yeah, I didn't even play Bonecrusher Giant, so I did not have those sweet lines available. My charms were like, I don't think I ever drew cards off them.
It was just a removal spell for you, or I see you have a screenshot here of you exiling their graveyard.
Yeah, it won me a game against Phoenix. I was able to take out 2 Phoenixes at once, but I lost the match just because it's actually just not a good use of a turn. Like,
yeah,
as much as we like the ability to like take out the graveyard in an emergency, you can't do it proactively. You can't stop a treasure cruise with it because they're just gonna keep cantripping, keep casting pieces of the puzzle. So it's like not even useful for that. You have to get very, very lucky to like catch the Phoenix in the graveyard, and even then you didn't gain card advantage. You lost card advantage.
Yeah, I think like even playing this, you still need the 4 Trespasser. Like that's the way to pressure their graveyard in a proactive way that forces them to play into it.
I agree. Trespasser was one of my more important cards. Ziatora's Envoy, not so much. I mean, I played 4 copies, so I drew this card like all the time. I felt like I always had Ziatora's Envoys.
Were you playing it on 4, or were you like waiting till a 5 to try to like rush it in there and get like a 5 mana, draw a card, play a 4 drop?
No, I was playing it on 4. I think one time, like I really, really needed to trigger a Fatal Push. I think my opponent had a Thought-Knot Seer in play, so I needed to kill that this turn. And so the Blitz ability was handy in that one very, very narrow scenario. But like, who plays Thought-Knot Seer in Pioneer? That's like not a real. It's like a fictional scenario.
It's just crazy. Like the thing where you like blitz it in is like, okay, I spent 5 mana. It's like 5 mana, draw a card, maybe replace the 5 mana I spent. Like you don't go up anything.
I know. I even had a Weathered Runestone in play. So it's like I couldn't even cast the card off for free. I had to like put it in my hand and then cast it from my hand, which was not a complete disaster, but yeah. So that card is a miss for me. I think any other 4-drop would have been better, Eska's Chariot or whatever, and just play more Graveyard Trespassers. But the card we were most excited about, Riveteers Charm, for me it was quite functional as a removal spell. Always got the card I wanted. It was always a good removal spell, just a little bit clunky. And yeah, I wasn't like totally convinced of the power level of Jund as a strategy.
Yeah, like you are making your mana appreciably worse, and the green card you're adding that you're really excited about is Riveteers Charm. I played a 2-drop that had a green symbol in it. You had Grim Flares. That's just a very medium card. Abrupt Decay has applications, but isn't that much better than Red Black. It's not that much better than Dreadbore most of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, unless Riveteers Charm is blowing your socks off, adding green is not adding much. I think that makes me want to try like a full-on like Sylvan Caryatid list, because Caryatid on 2, Riveteers Charm on their end of turn, and still like having the option to push or Thoughtseize or something is interesting to me. The extra mana makes me kind of dream about playing this Envoy on 3, maybe. Probably not though. But I think there's something to be said for like maybe you get to play a bunch more mana sources if you have Riveteers Charm to like fly through your deck. Because the games where I did draw Caryatid on 2, like you did just get to like deploy all your resources. So that's at least something to consider for me. It just sucks to have to play like you have to make sure you have a green source on 2, so then your like numbers get pretty wild in terms of like I didn't play any Tri-lands. Because again, I was trying to make sure when I got my charm, I could deploy a land, hopefully untapped, and still do all the things.
Yeah, what's the reason to play green? That's a important question. For me, like Culling Ritual in sideboard was probably my best green card, but that's very matchup dependent. I felt like I was playing a bad Rakdos deck, basically. But I like what you're saying. I mean, there's maybe something to explore.
But yeah, all in all, I think we've found that Jund continues to be very mediocre, and everybody in Pioneer and Modern should continue to play it if they enjoy going 3-2, which is the Jund 5-0, and we did that.
Exactly. It went exactly to plan.
Never. Some people try to play like synergy-based decks, and we just like thought seize them and fatal push their sweet cards, and then just beat them down with some mythic rare two mana creature. That's it. That's all you need to do.
It would have been weird to go better than 3 and 2.
It would have felt odd.
Yeah.
Well, man, I just stomped mono green in my first game. I was like, oh man, this list feels sweet, and then it was just like non-functional hand. Like Phoenix just curbs you, and it's just like sitting there looking at my 3 like graveyard trespassers in my hand, and turn 5 I don't have a third land. It's like, oh, this feels right.
Yeah,
this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well said. All right, that's gonna do it for us for today. A fitting end to Jund Week, but maybe we'll have some better luck as we test Extraction Specialists in the weeks to come.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. We'll leave it here. Take care, David.
All right, take care, sir.
Deck lists for this episode can be viewed at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And tune in next week for our testing results. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family in our Discord community and come brew with us. Sign up at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. That's all for today. Stay safe and we'll see you next time.